Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. As a human, you have a job to do. In fact, you have 4 jobs: to earn and manage money, to attain and maintain health and fitness, to build and sustain personal relationships, to find meaning and make a difference. None of these jobs are taught in school, and that is what this podcast is designed to do: to educate us all on living our most fulfilled lives through the mastery of these 4 jobs. I'm your host, Dr. Jade Teta, and I believe we are here living this life for 3 reasons and 3 reasons only: to learn, to teach, and to love. In this podcast, I will be learning, teaching, and loving right along with you. I'm grateful to have your company. Here's to our next level. It's time to talk about one of our sponsors of today's episode, AG1 by Athletic Greens. Now, many of you have heard me say this before, but I am not a fan of vegetables, which I know is funny given I've been in the health and fitness industry for so long. I blame my mother and father for this. When I was a kid, what they would do was essentially take the broccoli, the Brussels sprouts, the spinach, the collard greens, and just steam them. No salt, no fat, no taste whatsoever, just these bitter greens. And so I developed a distaste for a lot of different vegetables, which has stayed with me into adulthood. One of the things I've done to mitigate that is use a greens powder pretty much ever since greens powders have come out on the market. And I've tried every single one. They started out tasting like swamp water. I found a few that I really like the taste, but recently, one that I have been taking for a very long time, as you all know, I wear a continuous glucose monitor. I found that it was actually spiking my blood sugar because probably the tapioca starch in it, which some people don't respond to tapioca starch with elevated blood sugars. I was. And so it sent me on a mission to find another one. And one of my friends turned me on to AG1 by Athletic Greens. Now, I've heard about Athletic Greens and AG1 for quite some time. I just never tried it. And now that I have tried it, I have become a huge fan, so much so that I partnered with Athletic Greens and AG1 to sponsor this podcast. Now, let me tell you what happened here. After I saw that my blood sugars were spiking, my friend gave me a couple samples of AG1. I began using those and testing the blood sugar and found there was no spike. The other thing I found is that AG1 is interested in its taste profile. It's very neutral. The one I was taking before was a little sweet. I really loved it. But this one is very neutral, which actually suits me because what I found is I can actually not only take this first thing in the morning in water and have it taste very neutral, almost like there's nothing there. I can also add it into my protein shakes, which means now I'm getting double the greens than I was getting previously because I add this right into my protein shakes and it does not change the flavor of the shake at all. The other thing I realized once I started looking at the label is that this product is not simply a greens product. It also is a multivitamin, multimineral. It also has fiber, which acts as a prebiotic. It has probiotics in it, and it has functional mushrooms, which act as adaptogens in it. That's 4 different products essentially in one. And I've been taking mushrooms for some time. I stopped taking them now because now I have this in my greens. I have also taken my multivitamin and make this my multivitamin. So I'm actually saving money, and this is going to save you money as well. The product AG1 is also NSF certified. And you're going to say, Jade, what does that mean? The National Sanitation Foundation is a foundation that essentially does testing on products to make sure there are no harmful substances, no persistent organic pollutants, no heavy metals. Now, this costs money to do. AG1 and Athletic Greens has spent the money on this. They spend money on making sure that the product that you are getting is good quality without contamination in it. And you might say, well, Jade, isn't this true of all products? And actually, no, it is not. If you ever follow some of the news in this area through consumer labs and other things that do testing on these products, you'll see that many of them will have trace levels of things like mercury and cadmium and lead and things like that in them because they're not doing this testing. So this is an extra piece of insurance for us. The other thing I love about this product that I learned as I was doing my research on it is that this is the 52nd tweak or adjustment they have made to this product in their existence. AG1 has been tweaked 52 times. Now you might say, well, Jade, why would they be doing that? And the reason why is because they continue to improve. We know that science is evolving. We know that it's not just about more nutrients. It's about balanced nutrients. It's about the Goldilocks effect of this. And they are constantly learning, as we all are, and then constantly adjusting their product to taste better, to be more efficient and effective in delivering the nutrients. It acts as an antioxidant. It acts as a multivitamin. It's a prebiotic, a probiotic, and an adaptogen all in one. They have mastered this over several iterations of this particular product. And so I am a huge fan right now of AG1 and Athletic Greens. And I'm hoping that you will check this out. It's time for all of us to reclaim our health and arm our immune system with convenient daily nutrition. And AG1 does that with just one scoop in a cup of water every single day. That is all you need. There is now no longer a need for a million different pills and supplements to look after your health. All you need is this particular one. It really clears the stage to simplify your supplement regime. To make it easy for you, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/next level. That's athleticgreens.com/next level to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Check out AG1. I love it. I know you're going to love it. And I'm so happy that they are on board to sponsor the podcast as well. Thanks so much. Check out AG1, athleticgreens.com/next level. And let's get back to the show. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's show. This is episode 191 of the Next Level Human podcast. And this is the second part of a 2-part series with my best friend and colleague, Danny Coleman. He is also my co-author on the book, Next Level Tribe. Last week in episode 190, we had the first part of a very long conversation on connection and contentment. Last week, we spoke about connection. This week, we're picking up on that exact same conversation and talking about contentment. These things go hand in hand. This will be the follow-on to our last week's conversation. If you want to follow Danny, please do so. He is at It's Danny Coleman on all the social medias. He also has his own podcast, which is called Take Care Radio with Danny Coleman. As a reminder, Danny and I are co-authors on the book Next Level Tribe, a book we did several years back that has turned into a very popular book among individuals who are looking to understand how to connect, how to find contentment in their relationships. And that's what this discussion is all about. I hope you enjoy it. Please make sure you give us a review on Apple iTunes or whatever your favorite podcast platform is. I always appreciate you looking after our sponsors as well. So grateful for your interest and your support for this podcast. And let's get started with the show. So here's something that I would say is interesting about connection. And well, the first thing I'll say is that when you look at research on blue zones and stuff like this, you and I have talked about this, and this will bring us into this idea of contentment. And I think connection goes into this. But if you look at blue zone research, like, it's amazing that community, which obviously is what we're built for and is obviously where we get most of our connection. A lot of people think it's about what these people are eating or what part of the world they're living in. But when you look at that, like, these blue zones are in many different parts of the world. They're not just all in sunny, places. The diets are, sometimes extremely different. One of the things, and some of these places have a lot of what we would call negative behaviors. They drink, plenty of alcohol and things like that. And yet they're very long lived and very happy. And the one thing that they all do have, though, that is similar is connection and community, and people who have lived in the same place, in the same community for a very long time with the same people. And it seems to make the biggest difference in the world for them. And I think that's connection. But then I think the other part of this that you and I wanted to talk about is this idea of when you feel like you belong, when you feel like you're safe, when you feel like you have people who are on your team, and you do have a sense of, I'm safe, I'm happy, I'm more content. And I think if we look at metabolism, sort of in general, to me, it's just all about stress and stress management. And we think that it's about a supplement we take, the exercise we do, the diet. I think you and I have gotten to a place where I'm like, it's your perception about your social environment mainly, and whether you belong. If you really feel like you belong, there could be a war going on around you, and you will feel like you matter and make a difference, and you will be in a much happier place than people who've got nothing going on but also feel sort of isolated. And so I think this idea of contentment, I think, is a piece of it is connection. But then I go, what are the other pieces of this? And you brought up last night when we were in the sauna a Danish, is the Danes?
Yep.
So tell them a little bit about that, because I loved this.
Yeah, so we both love looking at different societies from a health perspective, from a well-being perspective, and I stumbled across a book called A Year of Living Danishly that I just finished and absolutely loved. I just started it. I don't even know why I started it. Like, it's so specific, but the idea was that this is the happiest, or consistently one of the happiest countries in the world. And the key theme throughout the whole book was this idea they have in their culture called hygge. And I think it's spelled Hygge, and it's pronounced hygge. And there's no direct translation to English, but it's this concept of really this internal feeling of coziness. So they're constantly doing things that try to just these warm sensations. I think we all kind of feel this. It's like the number one per capita place that burns candles. It's like they invest in stuff like wool and cozy outfits. They design their living spaces in ways that, like this, like the chairs. So you engage with other people, and they create these spaces, even though they also have one of the highest alcohol consumption per capitas. They're also one of the happiest and healthiest societies out there, which I find completely fascinating. So we were talking about this idea of hygge and just how we can create this in our lives when maybe our society being in America isn't exactly designed for it. Because one thing I will say, you look at all these other cultures like, wow, that's amazing. They do this so well. But what you forget about is the trade-off. So connection is wonderful. Belonging is wonderful, but it's also inconvenient and inefficient. And I think that's one thing that we miss in the West, because we are very about efficiency and convenience and go, go, go. And the problem is that connection's not convenient. Picking up your friend from the airport, especially in a city like LA or something, that's how you know who's in your corner. You driving to downtown LA to help me move. That is not convenient. And I'm always thinking about this, because in this book, The Danish, you help raise other people's kids. You help them with their lawn care. Like you're using a lot of your free time on other people. So it's not really efficient or convenient. And I find that really interesting. But yeah, this idea of hygge is just how can we create this? A lot of it is how we shape our living environment. You walk into every American household, and what does the couch face? The television. Whereas they are more oriented around each other. They create living spaces that are close. I like a lot of clothes. They also eat a lot of like baked goods. So it's not these healthy things. Drink a shit ton of alcohol. It's cold. They don't really get out and exercise or walk in the winter. It's cold for a long time. They're trapped in their house. So they burn candles and they have conversations and they play music and they just try to embody ways that really create that warm and fuzzy. So I've been trying to create that in my own life. And it's been a little bit of a challenge. It's new for me, but I love this concept of hygge.
Yeah, I love it too. And I think it dovetails really nicely nicely into the other conversation that we had or we're having about connection. Because to me, I guess I go, if you're content and you're constantly feeling filled up, you're far more likely to go out and want to fill other people up. It's easier to take one on the chin, so to speak, right? And I also like it because I think it dovetails into this idea of, what happens right now with the way we think about stress and the extreme individualism and the inability to recover and all the things that are going on. How many people are actually planning what they're going to do at night, versus like what they're going to eat and, what diet they're on and what exercise program they're going to do. I think it's extremely healthy. And I have been doing a lot of the same things, not knowing what I'm doing. Like, I tend to have a tendency to eat most of my calories at night, whether I'm watching TV or not, but definitely when it's associated with TV. And so one of the things I've noticed, perhaps because I've done a lot of this with clients, but I had never done it myself. But now I'll do a lot of these sort of warm and cozy things. I'll sit on my couch. I'll throw a blanket over me. I'll get sometimes wine, sometimes tea. I'll turn on some classical music. I'll have dimmers, and I'll just kind of sit there and not be on my phone and just think about how comfortable I am. And one of the things I try to do is a gratitude sort of that I'm lucky I'm here. I'm lucky I get to do what I do. This music is, really nice. I'm taking a lot more baths. It's not something guys, would normally say they do, but I'll take, sort of nice hot baths. I love my mornings, with my, sort of my cup of coffee. I meditate like pretty much, over the last 4 months, probably 20 to 40 minutes, 90+% of the time. And all of these things are sort of making me feel, when I go out of the house, very, very content with the way my life is, despite, some of the stresses and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's how, and a lot of that is exactly what you said about it's stress prevention. One thing we talked about last night too, and about the Danish, it's a program that they have in Denmark where the government will pay for a career transition. So you don't have to have savings. They'll pay for the education to go to trade school. They'll give you 2 years of time, and they'll really sort of help you along that path. And I was thinking about that. It's like, wow, I know it's totally different. I don't really, it's definitely above my head, the politics and how governments work and the population. Like, everybody there is Danish. There's 3 million people. We have 340 million people, and everybody is everything. It's a melting pot. So it's different, and I get that, but we can do things for ourselves to help that. Can we increase our savings rate? Like, for a lot of us, having a little bit of a financial security will take that. Let us lay our head on the pillow. Can we build an exercise habit, right? The healthier we are, the more energy we have, and the more resistant we are to stress. Can we create little routines like you have in the evening? I have some myself. I'd love if I can get 90 minutes in the morning of reading a physical book and 2 cups of coffee, and I have the lights a certain way. It's really quiet. Even I live with my wife and my brother, and they basically tiptoe around the morning. Like, Danny's not talking for the first 90 minutes. It's not like I'm grumpy or anything. It's just I'm in this hygge space. It's like I got my blankets and my pillows, and I got my book, and my mind is in the right place. So how can we create these systems in our life that help just make us more resistant to the inevitable stress of life? So no, we don't have government programs that maybe do a career transition, but can we set up savings and automate our savings in a way that if we did want to do that, we could do that? Can we automate our health routine so that when times inevitably get tough, we're more resilient to certain sicknesses and colds and things like that? So I'm always trying to think these days of just, even though we don't have all those things that was mentioned in the book, but there's a lot of things that I could take away and kind of create for myself.
Yeah, actually, it's this. I'll tell you, if it just popped in my mind, so I'll share it. But when I was at NC State, I would on the weekends I would bartend, but I also got another job washing dishes at the North Carolina Museum of Art in Raleigh. And I'm trying to think, hygge, what hit me is that the place where I felt the most hygge, sometimes I would, sometimes there'd be like a lull in the dishwashing, and sometimes I'd get ahead and, of things and or after I dishwash, and I'd walk out to the car and the sun would be shining, the car would be nice and warm. And I'd get into the car and take like this 5-minute, 10-minute like nap. Sometimes it wasn't even a nap because I had to go back to work, or I always had some other place I had to be. But I'll never forget, like I never forget how good that feels, and then how good it would translate over into my work, and then how I was with people. And I guess the reason I brought it up is because as you were talking, I was thinking about, like, most of the clients I've worked with most of my life are, they happen to be career women, oftentimes single with multiple children, right? And one of the things that I've found, and this just happened to be the group of people that I've worked with, women between the ages of 35 to, I would say, 65, but especially that, early 30s, mid 30s woman, they're starting to see all this dysfunction with their metabolism and stuff. And one of the things is that they're having a hard time. Of course, I didn't understand this until just last night when you told me about this, but it goes to this idea of the, metabolic recovery and dealing with stress. And they never could find any place to be in relaxation. And it just brought that up to me because I was like, I remember that 5 minutes in that car just felt like home. I still like to get in a car sometimes when early spring or something like that, and I'm out running errands and I get back in my car and the car is super warm. I oftentimes would just sit there for an inordinate amount of time, like, where I'm just sitting in the parking lot in this cozy car. And I think what we humans need to do is we need to think about this idea of contentment in that way. Now, the one thing I'll say about this to begin this, to kind of push this further, is that I oftentimes, and I want to just get your take on this because this is ideas that I know we've played on, but I think it'd be useful for the listener to hear this. Contentment and happiness, we talk about a lot, and I think they're incredibly important, and I think they come from having a deep meaning, like things around you that bring you meaning, but I do see meaning as an environmental situation, and that meaning can change, which means contentment can change. This hygge, this cozy feeling, it does require a particular environmental sort of situation that you have to come back to. And I think you have to create that. I think you have to continue, regardless of what's going on in your environment. I think you have to create this place to come back to. Viktor Frankl talked about it in terms of having certain experiences, certain work that fills you up, loved ones and stuff like that. But all that stuff can be taken from you. So then I move into the idea of fulfillment and joy, which I think is the evolution, a deeper sense of contentment and happiness. And I do think they are the quintessential emotional states that we humans really are searching for. It's not necessarily contentment and happiness, although we do need that and we want that. And I do think having that is, we need to have that before we move on to fulfillment and joy. But I think joy is a deeper expression of happiness, a happiness that comes out of us versus comes to us. And I also think that fulfillment is also a sense of contentment that flows out of us, doesn't flow into us. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that. Now, I'm only bringing it up because I've thought so deeply about this, and I've spoke about it in terms of meaning gives happiness and contentment. Purpose is more deep and more powerful, and it elicits joy and fulfillment. But I'm not so sure, and just want your take, and then the listeners sort of think about this. What do we all think are the ways to achieve this? One, do you agree with that assessment? Does it speak intuitively to you in any way? And two, like, how would you say that we would go about achieving these things? Because I think you need both. And I'll just add one more thing. I also think you need fun as well. So to me, I go fun and sort of that kind of stuff is the the beginning of the evolution. That translates into contentment and happiness, which is the mid part of the evolution, which then can translate into or evolve into fulfillment and joy.
And do you think these are linear? Is that how you see it?
I don't know that it's linear because I think you want to have it all the time, but I do think, yeah, in a sense, you can get people who mistake them, right? So you can get people who have some passion around something that they do, and it can be fun. Like, for example, maybe a young teenager who loves a particular video game or something like that and is very into it. And when they're into it, they're having fun. And maybe it brings a sense of, even as you get deeper into it, maybe it could bring you a sense of contentment and happiness for a time. But I do think that while you need those and they have to stay there, I'm not saying it's like you go from one to the other. I just think that there is a top of the pyramid, a place that we really should try to get to that belongs to us and flows out of us, and that passion alone and meaning alone don't do it, and happiness and contentment are not it. In fact, I'm bringing it up because I'm just wanting us all to think about the idea that I think it's kind of a mistake in our culture that we do talk about happiness and contentment as if it's something that can be maintained over the long run. I'm sorry to break into the show, but I wanted to take a second to cover one of our sponsors and tell you all about Paleo Valley at paleovalley.com. These are the grass-fed sticks that I tell you all so much about, that all of my friends know I have on hand constantly. They are in my car. They are at my house. I keep them at my sister's home and my parents' house. I have these things everywhere because they are the simplest, most convenient whole foods protein supplement you can get. Almost like carrying around pure protein, low carb protein in your pocket. These Paleo Valley beef sticks are the only 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef sticks on the market. They use organic spices. They are naturally fermented instead of using nitrates and nitrites that can be a problem in some of these cured meats. And they simply taste fantastic. Check out the original or the jalapeno. Those are my favorites. Please make sure you go over to paleovalley.com and visit. When checking out, use the code NEXTLEVEL for a 15% discount. Remember, our sponsors keep the show going by you giving them your patronage and spending your money on these high quality products. You actually do a few things. One, you're helping to support the podcast. And two, you are helping your health. And three, you are making sure that good quality companies like Paleo Valley can be out there doing their business, changing the world, making the earth better. One of the things you may not know about this is that grass-fed organic and grass-finished beef is doing something that is so utterly important for our environment, actually helping to repopulate the topsoil. A lot of people don't know this, but our topsoil is being extremely depleted, and raising animals, especially cattle, the correct way helps to get that topsoil back. This is one of the reasons why I love Paleo Valley. Not to mention it tastes fantastic, but they're one of these companies, like my other sponsors, Cured Nutrition and Organifi, that are doing the right things by the environment. I really appreciate everything they do, and I hope you will check them out. Thanks so much. paleovalley.com. Use the code NEXTLEVEL. And now back to the show.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if I have thoughts on your model right now, man. I'm letting it sink in a little bit, and I really like that. I always say that maybe it's related, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but this is things like fulfillment and even happiness are byproducts. They're not. So there are things like you start with the fun or the play. You start with a little bit of pleasure. You start with living by your values. Like character is a great sense of fulfillment. There's nothing, being proud of yourself for doing the right thing when it wasn't easy, when it wasn't efficient, I think is huge. These are all things that we can create. And I believe that fulfillment is more of a byproduct of that. So if you create a life in which you embody kindness because it's one of your values, and you embody honesty because it's one of your values, and integrity because it's one of your values, and that you act those out in the world, and you have your hobbies like your video games or something that takes you out of the stress of everyday life. I really do think a little bit of escapism is really important for us. Whether it's television or video games in the right dose, I think that's really, really important. Doing things that are fun, doing things with other people, moving or having a habit of movement, all those things that we actually do kind of fill into that byproduct of life satisfaction. So I'm probably taking it a little bit different direction. That's really interesting to think about, and I'll have to come back on the pod to talk about the model specifically. But something I stumbled across that I just want to share with all the listeners the other day is, do you know, Jay, the average age where people are where that life satisfaction is the highest and life satisfaction and fulfillment is the highest? What age you think?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. I have two answers to this, and we'll see which one is right. One part of me thinks that it's going to be in the late teens, early 20s, and the reason why I think that is because this is a part where you're learning a ton, you're highly engaged, you're having lots of struggles, you're having lots of wins, lots of losses. It can seem highly engaged, but that I don't want to answer that, and the reason why, because I think that that's a potential, but I also think people at that time of their life, they might look back at that time of their life and go, that was a wonderful time. But I think they're too anxiety driven or too in the adolescent state to really appreciate that. So I think that's a part that someone might look back on, the ages between 19 to 30 as being like a really engaged, sort of happy time in hindsight. But if you're going to ask me in as an adult, I would probably say it's somewhere around retirement age, like somewhere maybe between the ages of 50 years old and 65 years old. And the reason I say that is because I think at this point in time, a lot of people will have had a measure of achievement. They are old enough to have figured some things out. They know where they sort of stand in life. They've developed some things they can look back on, like children, some things that they can be proud of and that kind of thing. So those would be, sort of my two answers. I also think that I don't think I'd be surprised if you told me it's older individuals. And the reason why is because I think people in their 80s can start that connection piece, apart, they start losing a lot of friends or spending a lot of alone time. Loneliness can creep up. But yeah, I'm curious, what is it?
It's 80. And the reason why is, and now this is one study and this is one survey, but the survey had a good amount of, thousands of people, so a good amount of respondents, and it was 80, and actually it was pretty straight linear up. As you get older, you're more satisfied and fulfilled, and the reason why is acceptance. You're more accepting of who you are. You like yourself more than ever. You're okay sitting in a room with yourself, unlike ever before. I remember being a kid, my grandpa always being the quietest guy in the room, but also kind of the happiest. Like very, very, his presence was very just confident and content. To use that word, content is probably what he was. So it's interesting that it's 80, and it's also interesting that we spend so much of our youth chasing achievement. Or the perfect body, and the smartest mind. And meanwhile, when you get to 80, your brain's going, your body's going, you're not achieving anymore. A lot of 80-year-olds are not achieving anymore, and yet you have the most fulfillment. So I found that really interesting. But you do hit on something. I'll just throw this in there as a nugget. We've talked about this before, the reminiscence bump. So the reminiscence bump is what researchers call the period from 15 to 30, exactly what you were describing. And it does tend to be the most memorable part of life, good or bad. But we have when we think of memories, they're typically in that range. And the reason why is because it has the most novelty. So you're switching 15, start switching schools, you go to high school and you go to college and you go to the real world. In your 20s, you move around, or you're trying new jobs, you're doing different things, you're meeting a bunch of people, trying to date. So all this piled, it's actually the most memorable time, but you're right, it's the most anxiety ridden time. So people do look back on it fondly, but typically as we age, we get happier and more fulfilled and more just satisfied with both ourselves and life as a whole, which I found really interesting, because I was surprised that I didn't think older individuals either for that exact reason.
Yeah, I love that so much. And it makes me think about myself even, this idea of, and maybe this is a Western thing, like I'm a very achievement oriented, and fulfillment certainly has a sense of achievement. I set out to do something. I feel fulfilled because I stood for something and I stood up for that thing that I, stand for. I actually showed up. But it's really interesting because, interestingly enough, Danny and one of the reasons Danny came into town is because of my father, who he's very close to as well. Because, me and Jill and Danny all lived together for a long time, spent a lot of nights over at my father's house. He's turning 80. And it's funny because when I think about him and in terms of my father's contentment, he's a pretty simple man. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I can see he's gotten fearful. Like he certainly talks about death a lot lately. Of course, it's coming for him, which, is not a nice thought for any of us. But one of the things I did notice, and sorry if this gets morbid, but I talked to my dad about death, and he seems to like the idea that someone's talking to him about it. But when I think about how content he is, I can pretty much vibe with that. He seems, to me, the calmest, the most just good. Like he seems in gratitude more often. Like sometimes I'll sit there with him when the whole family's around. He's like, isn't this great? Like, this is just great. Or the other day I was watching the Jets with him, which I haven't watched football in such a long time, but the Jets are doing really well. It's our favorite team. And I wanted to share that with him because we haven't shared it in a while. And he's just like, he's finding joy in things. Like, isn't this great? I've watched them since I've seen every Super Bowl. I saw Super Bowl III when they won, and maybe they'll get, and he just seems to be enjoying really small things. He does seem to be pretty content, and that's despite the fact that death is looming large in his mind.
Yeah, and probably health stuff, aches and pains, things that physically we spend so much time trying to avoid and look good, keep the abs and all, and then all of a sudden you just don't give a shit. Acceptance and gratitude become more popular thoughts. I found that really interesting. But yeah, I'm glad you brought your dad up because I was going to ask, like, would you say in your conversations with him that, and I'll ask him this weekend too, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, you want to know what's interesting about, I think, my father. I talked to him a lot about this because obviously you and I, this is what we do. And this speaks again to the discussion you and I had together about connection. Like part of what I'm interested in people's deep thoughts, about what they, sort of are going through. And I ask him about these things a lot. But my father is pretty simple. He stays in the present moment. So I do think this idea of contentment and acceptance and being just present. My dad doesn't get too far ahead in the future, and he doesn't dwell on many things from the past. My mom, on the other hand, is very different than that. She's a little more neurotic than him, can think about insults in the past and things that were done to her or things that weren't fair and dwell on that stuff. She also tends to worry about things that she's not getting done and this and that kind of thing. But my dad definitely doesn't seem to dwell on things from the past. And I actually want to talk about with this contentment, one particular thing that we talked about that I want to make sure, and that's regret. But I think that the acceptance and this idea, he doesn't hold on to much. He's very much in the present moment. And I bet you if you ask him, like when you ask him, he's just pretty much like, Dad, what was your secret? Like, how do you feel about your life? And he's very well respected everywhere. He's not a successful man in the cultural level way of seeing it. But he's shown up for everybody, put his financial situation aside for everybody. All of his kids are successful because he helped us. And he does seem proud of himself. But I don't think he has any regret. And that's the other thing. How can we as humans have any sense of contentment at all if we are in regret about the past? And you had a lot to say about regret and the different aspects of regret. And I don't think you could feel content while you're feeling regret. But I'm wondering how you see that.
Yeah, man. Thanks for teaming me. I love this shit. I just finished another book, The Power of Regret by Dan Pink, and this was definitely a confirmation bias book for me because I remember even back living with you and Jill, I just remember you guys being like, I don't have any regrets, and I just remember being a little bit perplexed, like, how do you not have regrets? Like, it didn't make sense to me, and I couldn't articulate why. And this book comes along, and the thing about regrets, if you're one of these no regrets people, I would argue, correct me if I'm wrong, dear listeners out there, but I would argue that of course you've had regrets. And the reason I say that is because if you ask anybody who says, I don't have any regrets, you just say, well, is there anything you would do differently? And they go, well, yeah, there's a couple things I would do differently. So you go, well, that's a regret. What I think typically people mean, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, when they say I have no regrets, is that they're not ruminating on those regrets. They're not playing them over and over in their head. They're not reliving them over and over. And it's a huge distinction because regret is a normal part of the human experience. I actually just did a quick pod a little bit covering this on my own podcast. It's part of the human experience. If you're living, welcome to the club. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to trip up. You're going to say something stupid. You're going to do something you wish you didn't do. And that's perfectly normal. And there's so much power in that to learn, to grow, there's a bunch of research showing how regret makes people more resilient. Things like they track silver medalists in the Olympics, and they turn out to be the most persistent, hungry people in the world because they play back this videotape in their mind. If I only just maybe trained a little harder, if only I just ran a little faster or played this curve a little differently, they become even hungrier for the gold the next Olympics. And so we all experience regrets, and I think those of us who can utilize them in the right way, first of all, just acknowledging that, hey, yeah, we all have regrets. That's a human experience. Now, not ruminating on those regrets is great, but taking the lesson, taking the time to say, what could I have done differently is actually a huge piece of learning and development. And I would actually argue that's probably where a little bit of the 80-year-old contentment comes from, is people, they've seen so much. They've made a ton of mistakes and they've seen things work out, or they've seen how things evolve, or they see things that maybe you think are a huge deal I'm 31. Maybe they're a huge deal to me that your dad would be like, dude, that is like a tic-tac of a problem. You know what I'm saying? So I think a piece of that's why we get so content in our 80s. But and we can go in a different direction, but I'm glad we kind of touched on this because I really do think it's an important part of contentment. Those who struggle either just deny that they have regrets, they don't learn from those mistakes, and that's a problem. Or on the other end of the spectrum, those of us who replay the thing over and over and over and over and over, that's not beneficial either. So you want to find that sweet spot, take the time with that stuff. And maybe we could talk a little bit about some of the wet process, the wet therapy, because this kind of applies to that, and how to reshape, and story editing, things like that we can really reshape some of our experience to be really positive and carry us forward towards contentment.
I want to jump in real quick and tell you about one of my favorite new products. And to start out, I want to ask you a question. If you had to follow your friends around who are not the healthiest in the world and see what they are doing, what would be the number one thing you would probably tell them to do to start? For most people, that's going to be drinking more water, right? This is something that we talk about all the time in health and fitness. It's almost as if we think of it as an afterthought now, because obviously water is so crucial. However, we oftentimes get this wrong. For example, did you know that when it comes to hydration, just drinking water can make things worse? Most people don't know this. Why? Partly because most people are over drinking water and under consuming the electrolytes that help water do its job. What we don't realize is that hydration is not just about water. It's about electrolytes, the minerals in there, as well as getting that water into the cells. And so you do not want to be over consuming water if you're not getting your electrolytes right. And this opens up a whole new discussion because most people are not getting their electrolytes right. For example, did you know that too low sodium is an issue? Just as much, if not more so, than high sodium. In other words, what we want if we're going to get the right electrolytes is to get the right amount of sodium and potassium and magnesium in the Goldilocks zone. We don't want too much. We don't want too little. We want it just right. This opens up a whole other thing here too, because people who are exercising, doing sauna therapies, doing low carb diets are disrupting and losing lots and lots of their electrolytes. For example, when insulin is not around in low carb diets, you will excrete lots of sodium. In other words, under that state, exercising, low carb diets, all these things, you actually need more sodium. And so if you're somebody who has been just drinking water, not paying attention to electrolytes, and also feeling fatigued, feeling like you're underperforming, not sleeping right, getting cramps, twitches, headaches, any of these things, then you are probably dealing with an electrolyte issue. This is where the product Element comes in. This product has been a game changer for me and many of my patients and clients. This is a rehydration electrolyte beverage, basically. It is a powder of electrolytes formulated with 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams magnesium without the added sugar and other nonsense that comes in beverages like Gatorade. This stuff is basically a rehydration beverage on steroids. It is the thing that is going to replenish your electrolytes in the right ratios, decrease fatigue, really correct chronic dehydration. And by the way, many people are dehydrating themselves, becoming hyponatremic, low sodium, when they're consuming too much water. You need your electrolytes on board, especially if you are someone who is losing lots of sodium and other electrolytes through low carb diets and lots of exercise. This is where Element comes in. Element is a new sponsor to the Next Level Human podcast. I cannot recommend this product enough. I have been using this stuff for months now, and I have immediately seen changes in my energy levels. I feel like I'm operating on a whole other level, and I have seen this as being the primary thing that people who have been using Element have been telling me, that their fatigue is getting better, especially fatigue that comes after very intense workouts that involve lots of sweating and lots of intense output from the nervous system. Please check out Element. Use the code NEXTLEVEL. DrinkElement.com. That's DrinkElement.com. DrinkElement.com, and let's get back to the show.
Yeah, I really, this is what I love about conversations like this, and one of the things I love about even the podcast and stuff, because I have been historically, and why you got to be grateful for people who put out books like this book that you read, and then people who teach these books to us, because I have historically been someone who hasn't been aware of that distinction, because I've always been like, I don't do regrets. Regret is a choice. But I love this distinction, because I think what you're saying is, yeah, we all do regrets. But the choice is whether we ruminate on them, or I guess to use another R, reconcile them, right? It's just like, are you ruminating on it and living in regret? Or are you reconciling and learning from regret? And that maybe is the difference. I don't ruminate, but from now on, I'm going to change that, because I think this is a really good, these kind of distinctions are really useful, right? Because if I say something like, and Mike points this out, our mutual friend Mike points this out a lot to me, because I'll say stuff and he goes, I get it, but you're kind of like, that's alienating people. Like, a lot of people do have regrets. And, then I go, yeah, I guess I do, but I don't ruminate. So that's the choice point. So maybe it's rumination versus reconciling. And then I guess the next, sort of question here is, well, for example, my affair, with your sister. I was married to your sister. And a lot of people, if you're listening, you may not know, we always laugh about this because we're ex-brother-in-laws. I mean, he's just my brother, but what's really interesting is that if I didn't regret, right, then I couldn't learn. So yeah, like, I just guess I never thought about it. Like, I regretted for a time. Otherwise I wouldn't have been motivated to be a different human, and grow from it. So maybe that's the distinction. And it's a distinction between being stuck in victim. I oftentimes talk about this a lot too. And it's highly triggering. And it was triggering to me when I first understood this distinction, which is like, being a victim is a normal thing. If you've been injured or harmed by somebody, I certainly am a person who goes, you should get empathy. You should have compassion. If we're good humans, we do want to take care of you. But at some point, anyone who's been a victim has to make a choice to stop being a victim. Otherwise, you live in victim and you're doing yourself double and triple harm. And I think it's the same thing here, this distinction that you're making. It's like, everyone regrets, and you have to have these regrets to learn. The choice is whether you live in regret, whether you ruminate on these regrets, whether you make your mistakes and your regret degrade you versus do you grow from them. And one thing that Danny's referring to is that in PTSD research, I came across this study recently when I was preparing for a talk on resilience for A4M. This therapy called WET therapy is just written exposure therapy. And in PTSD, one of the gold standard treatments is 12 sessions of a type of exposure therapy. And it does involve writing, but it's sort of reliving and processing. Think of it as mainly talk therapy. You're sort of talking around what happened. And it's been the gold standard, and it's 12 sessions, and each session is about 90 minutes, and it has a pretty high dropout rate. And this other therapy that's essentially 5 sessions, it involves writing about the emotions around what happened. And so you can imagine this is a pretty, traumatic thing for people who've been through, very traumatic events. But it's really the simplest therapy in the world. You basically go in, it's roughly 40 to 50 minutes. The therapist basically says, I want you to write about what happened, and I want you to focus on the emotions around it. And that's really the first session. Write what happened, write your trauma, and focus on how you feel. And then the next time the person comes back, they do that again. And the third time they do it again. And now it starts to be a little bit like now, put some meaning to it, so it's sort of like, what Danny and I would call story editing, which is a sense of writing your story up to present moment and then writing into the future, imagining how it grew you. So this WET therapy is the exact same thing. It's just done over 5 sessions. And not pretty strikingly, it actually performs as well or better than the gold standard PTSD treatments in 5 sessions that are 40 minutes long versus 12 sessions that are 90 minutes long with no homework, just the writing exercise. And I think what it might be speaking to is this idea of processing the feelings so you don't have to live in them anymore. One of the things that I think is crucial about feelings is that we have to be in our what I would call emotional integrity. We should make sure that we feel the emotions we feel. But again, we don't want to live in them. We don't want to live in regret. We don't want to live in anxiety. We don't want to live in depression. We can feel these things. But if we live in them, it obviously keeps us from being content, right? Because you can't be in depression and anxiety and regret and these things and also feel content at the same time. And so if you're living in those places, then there's no wonder you don't have a sense of contentment. And I bet even if you are doing this, what is the Danish term, hygge? Hygge. Even if you are doing these hygge activities to get this warm, fuzzy, cozy feeling, but internally you're living in this place where you're waiting for the apology, or you're waiting for someone to forgive you, or you're ruminating over the mistakes you made or mistakes someone else made or whatever. How can you possibly, if you're living that day in and day out, you're a shell of yourself and you're not going to be able to get in that place. And I think that's why gratitude, as much as it's a cliche, and it kind of bothers me, it's become such a cliche, but it is powerful, because if you can get yourself into a gratitude state, everything does melt away. You can't be in a grateful state and be having regret and all these things. So gratitude to me may be a shortcut to contentment.
Yeah, you're probably right. And it has become a little bit of a platitude, right? 3 things you're grateful for, but people turn it into a checklist item. I say people, I'm talking about me. I turned it into a checklist item every morning, so I wasn't really getting the power of it, so I stopped. And I probably don't practice gratitude just as a general framework like I should, like we were talking about earlier. You got to have the essence of non-judgment, or the essence of I'm actually interested in people. You have to have the essence of gratitude to actually reap the benefits of gratitude. So I would agree with that. And I'm glad you covered the WET. There's another exercise called the Pennebaker writing exercise, which we're both familiar with. This is a professor out of the University of Texas, James Pennebaker, who actually stumbled across this through his own pain. That might not be, I always like to go, like, this is a regular person exercise. I say regular person, meaning just like 80% of us don't have this trauma that a lot of the people who go through WET do. And this is a great just everyday exercise for all of us. And you just set a timer for 20 minutes, 3 days in a row, 20 minutes each writing session, and you just write about the experience, whatever it was. It doesn't have to be a life-altering experience. It could just be one of these regrets that you have, mistakes. Write about it for 20 minutes in the sense of what happened, how did you feel about it, maybe what did you wish you did differently, and then you just do it again the next day. And the interesting thing about this, people I'm sure are like, why would I do the same thing 3 days, is when you write and rewrite, as you know, Jade, writing books, different things come out of you. Different insights, different emotional experiences, different words, and it really helps you articulate and put an understanding and package up whatever that experience was and helps you learn from it. And I think on the other end, just to wrap up the regret sort of and trauma discussion, there is an other end of that spectrum. So ruminating is not the solution, and also ignoring is not the solution, which is, I think, the issue that maybe Mike has, and honestly I do too, with the idea of I have no regrets. To me, it means, well, maybe we're missing an opportunity there to just learn something or grow. If you ignore it, you're not getting the benefit of that experience of how you could do something differently. So on the one end, if you spend too much time in it, that's not helpful. You stay in the victim state forever. On the other end, if you just ignore it, which I tend to do, if I have issues, I'm just like, nah, let's sweep them under the rug. Let's keep it moving. That's probably not the healthiest thing either. So it is a spectrum, and there's a couple different ways to think about that ultimately will lead to that contentment that we're talking about.
Yeah, actually, the word that I came up with as you were talking before, ruminating versus reconciling, and I think I'll stick with that for a while, because I feel like I have, through my writing, reconciled. And actually, one just final perhaps thing here is about writing. I think I told you this, and I think I may have mentioned it on the podcast for those of you who listened to this. When I did ayahuasca, the psychedelic, I went down to Costa Rica and did 3 sessions with ayahuasca. And at one point, it puts you in this this state where the best way to describe it is you're detached. You have like this break from your ego consciousness. So you feel connected to everything. And there were moments where I just was essentially felt dead. Like I was just out there in the giant electron, basically. And then I'd open my eyes and come back in, and I could tell that a lot of people, at least, afterwards, we'd have these sessions where people would talk about their experiences. And a lot of people were dealing with old wounds and old traumas and heartbreaks and difficulties with their parents. And I was getting none of that. And so the last night, as I came back into consciousness in one part, it would be like I'm not aware of who I am or what I'm doing. I'm just having these felt experiences, and I'm not feeling like I'm Jade, and I don't know I'm in a room, and I don't know I'm in Costa Rica. I'm just everywhere. But then I'd open my eyes and be like, oh, I'm Jade. I'm in this room. I'm in Costa Rica, right? And in one of those moments, I said, why am I not reliving old traumas? And I had this immediate insight, and this is what this drug, I guess, does, or this experience does. I had this immediate insight that I processed all of them through writing, through thousands and thousands and thousands of words. And I've had the experience of writing stories, and I don't cry much. Like, I'm not someone who typically emotes in that way. When I was young, I was angry a lot, which is a form of crying. But when I have been emotional in the last several years, it always is from writing. And so I process that stuff. And so maybe that's how I'm processing these regrets. That's how I'm reconciling my mistakes. That's how I am feeling this sense of contentment, because I don't have to have, carry that backpack full of all this heaviness, because I've unloaded it on sheets of paper or in notes on my iPhone or in, a Word document on my computer.
There's certainly some evidence to that, right? Getting it out, getting words. That's the benefit of talk therapy too. It forces you to, whatever's swirling around your head. We think our thoughts are really clear and distinct, and then when we try to get them out, we see how messy they actually are. So when you're writing, it helps you put a shape on the experience and helps you make sense of it, which is hugely powerful to create meaning, to move past it, to create growth and learning opportunities. It's interesting you said about writing kind of moves you emotionally. Every year for my family, I write them these Christmas letters. And they're basically, I stumbled across some research from Martin Seligman. He's a founder of positive psychology, calls them gratitude letters. And basically you write a letter to somebody saying how much you appreciate them and all genuine stuff that you love about them and what you're so grateful for with the relationship. And then you go and read them these letters. And the results, just the improvements in mood, the improvements of connection, the improvements of the relationship are just astronomical. So I started doing these Christmas letters to people in my life. And I go to a coffee shop early December every year. I start writing these letters. Dude, I'm freaking bawling in public. I don't cry all year, and all of a sudden I'm going through it. And then I leave. I feel like I got my ass kicked, like punched and beat up, like my body feels heavy. But I also feel this sense of ease and probably a little hygge. To be honest, like I feel warm inside. My body feels, it does feel like I got my ass kicked, but it also feels like my shoulders are down. It feels like my jaw is relaxed. It feels like my gratitude meter is full. So it's a really powerful exercise to do, I think, and it's something I made a routine. And actually, people are like, first of all, you're a terrible gift giver, so stop getting us gifts. Just write those letters. So they actually appreciate them more as well, and I think it's really been beneficial to my relationships.
I love that. Well, let's wrap up by like giving, maybe, some of the major things you do in your life, or even just anything that you think is the most important for this conversation around contentment, and even connection from the last conversation we had. Like, what would you say are the major take homes for people, that they, could focus on?
Yeah, I'll give a short answer because I like stuff like that. And your mom actually inspired this one. And I kind of repeat this mantra to myself over and over and over. And your mom used to say, what'd she say? She would say, do your job and take a walk. Just like these simple little things. And my thing is take a walk and call someone. So it's like, I think very simply, the more you can move your body in very easy ways, taking a walk with a friend, stuff like that, and spend time with people that make you feel good. I think it's a very simple formula, because then it actually leverage all that stuff. When you're in movement, you get all the brain chemistry gets pumped up. You start feeling really good. Your energy is up. When you connect with people that you love, like I said, when I leave this trip, I'm going to be full of creative energy. I'm going to be looking people at the eye. I'm going to be smiling at them. I'm probably going to talk to somebody on the airplane, which I haven't done in a while. And so I would just say, figure out ways. And that's why I love frameworks and not like tactics, because I'm not going to tell you what to do with your life. I don't know what to do with my life, but I do know how important it is to just move your body and surround yourself with people that make you feel good. And I like to think that's the first domino down the path. And obviously we talked about a bunch of different tools, writing exercises, competence, random acts of kindness, gratitude. All of those things are absolutely wonderful, but find your own little mantra that just gets you around the people in your life that juice you up at the best you can. And so it's a platitude to end this. This complex podcast ends with pretty basic advice, and everybody's like, great, thanks for the help, Dan.
Actually, no, I actually think it's not. I really don't think it's, it may be basic on the surface, but these are things that are incredibly important. It's the first thing that you'll forget when you're going through tough times. And the other, my final thought would be something that is a little different. I'm going to do the same thing that Dan did and not rehash everything we talked about. I'll just share one silly little thing that I do that Danny knows, that you all might find silly, but I actually think it might be beneficial for some people. And to me, so I go, I'm playing a game, right? And the game that I'm playing, because we humans, we just tell ourselves stories. And my thought is the power of the stories we tell determines the quality of the life that we will live. So if we're telling a victim story, or a world is bad story, or humans are evil story, or whatever it is, that's how the world's going to show up. So one of the games that I play is that someone is watching me. Now, most of you who listen to this podcast know I'm not someone who believes in a traditional God, but I have become more and more spiritual, and I have started to believe that there's certainly something, perhaps something that we're not necessarily aware of, that the universe is bigger than we may imagine. But I don't necessarily believe there's really anyone keeping score or anything keeping score. But the story that I can keep score, that at the end of my life, I'm kind of like in my head being like, I want a big generosity score on my scorecard when I am on my deathbed. I want a kindness score. I want, to remember the big touchdowns I've had in life, things where I've helped people. And for me, that means without reciprocation, the need for acknowledgement or reward. For me, it's like, I want to be like, where did I take it on the chin for society? Where did I take it on the chin for friends? Where did I put my own needs aside for others? And something about this, it's just my game. So I'm not saying you use my game. I'm saying it may be useful to come up with a game for yourself about What is the story that you tell yourself that makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside about yourself? And this is one of the things that it does for me. Like when I can sit down at the end of the day, and it's not necessarily a gratitude practice for me. It's actually a practice of feeling proud of myself. So I have this pride, and pride is sometimes a negative word, but I have this proud score. How proud will I be of the actions that I've taken at the end of my life? And that actually allows me to get into a content state pretty fast. So
we'll wrap up there, man. I mean, this is the problem with us, man. I have something else to share. We can go 4 hours.
Share it, and then we're going to end, because I think it's important when you have something that is elicited by something.
I think you're tapping into something really powerful that we all need to tap into, and it's this discrepancy between our future selves and our present selves, meaning you say at the end of my life or at the end of the day, will I be proud of this? And I think that's a really important take home, because in brain studies, they show when we think about ourselves, one part of the brain lights up, and when we think about our future selves, a completely different part of the brain, we don't even lights up. So we don't even see ourselves as our future selves. They're complete strangers to us, which is really, really fascinating. And that's why these exercises and games you just mentioned are really important. Doing things, the deathbed exercise, on my deathbed, what will I be proud of? The eulogy exercise, if someone read my eulogy, what words and characteristics would come up? And I think it's a really powerful tool to try to connect ourselves to who we want to be at the end of our lives and try to close that gap between our future self and present self, and it'll act. And then all of a sudden, all the little things that happen in our life, all the little problems, all the little annoyances become less so, and we're able to be our next level selves, to use your term, much more easier, and we do more things that we're proud of. So I'm sure we keep going on, dude. But I just thought that was a really interesting point by you, or a great exercise to do, just to make you more connected in the moment, more content in the moment, and really more proud in the things you do in this moment.
Yeah, and let me finish up with just one story, and then we'll end, because it just made me think of this. I had this person DM me. I get this stuff sometimes, and it was a guy, and he is going through a really tough time, and he asked if we could talk, so we talked. And so one of the things that happened is he was betrayed by his wife. His wife was with someone else. He, basically left the house. His daughters, he had daughters, don't really understand what's going on and think, sort of he left. So there's this big riff, sort of in the family, and he's beside himself. And this is months ago we had this conversation, but he DM'd me recently, and I forgot what I said, but this just brings it full circle, and it's a really nice thing. But one of the things I said is, because he goes, I don't know how to be. Like, I don't know how to be with my wife. I'm angry as hell, but obviously I still love her. I don't know how to behave with my kids, because my home doesn't feel like my home anymore. And he was just reeling. And so, but the thing I focused on was the idea that he doesn't know how to behave. And I was like, imagine you're going to die in 3 days. What would you want your children, and how would you be, and what would you say to your children and your wife who betrayed you? How would you want them? How would you want to leave them? And he goes, I would want my wife to know that I love her. That's it. And I forgive her. And I'd want my kids to know they're unconditionally loved. And I was like, that's the answer. No matter how hard it is, that's the answer of how to behave. That's what will make you proud. And recently he got back in touch with me. He goes, that conversation has made all the difference. I haven't been able to do it all the time, but in general, my relationship with myself is better, and my relationship with my kids and my wife are better. And I think it's just a good place. We always have that within us if we think about that.
I love that, man. Yeah, that's a great spot to end the pod. That's really powerful stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks so much for hanging out on the podcast, you guys. Make sure that you check out Danny's podcast as well, and make sure you check out Next Level Tribe. What's the name of your podcast? Tell them.
Take Care Radio.
Take Care Radio. And at what's your Instagram?
At It's Danny Coleman.
At It's Danny Coleman.
It's Danny Coleman.
So at It's Danny Coleman. Take Care Radio for Danny. Make sure you check him out, and make sure you guys, if you really dig this stuff, Danny and I, it's funny. We wrote the book Next Level Tribe, and we got the first draft done in a weekend, 48 hours. It was really cool. And it's one of these books we were talking about the other day that has stood the test of time. It's actually the one book that I have been involved with that has the most, it's like no one's given it anything less than a 5-star rating, basically. It's on Audible. Danny and I basically read it for Audible, and it's on Amazon. And it's a book we're really proud of. So definitely, if you're into this stuff, check it out, and we'll see you at the next show.